With strong finishes to the season for Marcell Ozuna and Raisel Iglesias, should the Atlanta Braves consider bringing them back for one more year? I'll answer that question and many more on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there as well at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out as well. Just leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to all my everydayers out there who take the time out of your busy day to listen to us each and every day. I think I've said day enough. Let's get into this week's Mailbag podcast. Got 27 questions to answer on today's episode. As always, a wide variety of questions, but a couple in there about the possibility of bringing back Marcell Ozuna and Raisel Iglesias. And this episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and use the promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order, only valid through September 30th. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Well, let's jump into the questions so I can try to give them as much time as possible. Like I said, we do have a lot to get to. Philin TN says, hey, Jake, we keep hearing a lot about Acuna moving to DH next year. What about left field? It would likely cut down on injuries substantially. Plus, you could use him as DH on days you want to rest him. I don't know that I've heard the team specifically talk about needing to move Ronald to DH. I think that's more just people like me and others who have talked about the idea of transferring or transitioning Acuna to the DH spot just to help out with injuries. I do think he'll need to be there a lot going forward to try to take some of that off of him. Or if he's, has a day, he wakes up, he's just, the knees aren't feeling great, he may need a DH that day. So I think there are going to be more opportunities to put Acuna in the DH spot if they don't bring back Marcell Ozuna, which obviously we'll get into later. But I don't think there's necessarily a need or a push to mostly put Acuna in the DH spot. I still think he is primarily going to be an outfielder for a while. I mean, you see the strong arm out there. I did a whole video breakdown on his arm out there and just how incredible it is. You don't want to take that out of it. As far as right field to left field, it really just kind of depends on the ballpark. He does a great job in that right field at Truist Park. I mean, he makes some unbelievable catches up against that wall. So he feels comfortable out there, I would think, but it may just be ballpark dependent whether or not you put him in right or left field. I don't know that it necessarily makes that big of a difference as far as injury concerns go. Eric8504 says, if we make Ronald our permanent DH, who would be the best available free agent to replace him in right field? Well, it would be Kyle Tucker, but as I just talked about a minute ago, I don't believe they're going to make Ronald a full-time DH right now. Hopefully another offseason, just kind of rest those knees, come back. I still think he has good years left in him in the outfield. When I've talked about Ronald as a full-time DH in the past, I'm talking about if you were to sign him to a new deal, if the Braves were to give him an extension, you got to do that with the mindset that, in his, maybe 32 to beyond years, he could be a DH. Full-time DH with those needs, similar to Juan Soto, who probably even sooner than that is going to need to shift into a DH role. Daniel Blake Hill, going into the season, I said that shortstop was the biggest hole on the team. Am I crazy for saying that I'm just fine with Nick Allen at shortstop and using the money to upgrade what now seem to be much bigger holes? I guess let me ask you a question, Daniel. What do you see as much bigger holes right now? First base is obviously very good. Catcher is obviously very good. Right field is very good. Center field is looking better. With third base, I know there's some people out there that doubt Austin Riley, but I think third base is fine. So you're looking at shortstop, second base, and potentially left field, although I think Profar has been fine out there as well, doing pretty much exactly what you wanted him to do and getting on base, putting the ball in play. So you're really looking at second base, shortstop, and that's it. Especially if you were going to keep the DH spot fluid and not bring in a full-time DH and put the catchers in there, give Ronald days in there. So, I mean, it really does come down to shortstop and second base. And look, I love Nick Allen as much as the next person. And if everybody else is doing their job in the offense, kind of like they are right now, you see the offense is flowing and you don't really worry about Nick Allen and his 500 OPS down there. But it is a 500 OPS in your lineup, and you got to play Gold Glove level defense to overcome that. And he is right now, or at least has been this season. Again, that's a fine line. We talked about it a lot with Orlando Arcia, who was not as bad as this offensively and was still playing above average defense for you. But if that defense ticks back at all, and suddenly you got a guy with a 500 plus OPS, OPS between 500 and 600, and he's just giving you, even just above average defense, I think that's still a big hole on your team. Dustin Amount says, Hurston Waldrop is closing in on highs for innings pitched. Do you think he gets shut down after a few more starts, even if pitching well? Here's the thing with Hurston Waldrop. The year he got drafted, he threw over 130 innings. So he has that built up in him. He's just over 100 innings now, I believe, combined between majors and minors. I think he's okay to go up to 130, 150 innings pitched this year. So again, they might shut him down at some point, depending on, obviously that workload, but I don't think it's any time soon. I think there's the ability for him to throw 130 to 150 innings this year. Zach says, Michael Harris has been on a heater since the All-Star break. Has he done enough to solidify himself as the center fielder of our future? Yeah, we talked about Michael Harris a lot in a podcast earlier this week, and I didn't see what I wanted to see when I was breaking down the adjustments first half to second half for Michael, because basically what we've seen in the second half for Michael this year is the same thing we've seen for Michael in the second half of the last two seasons. He's just making better contact, hitting the ball harder, which is great, but he's done that in the second half of every year. And so what am I to believe that he can continue to do that in the first half of next year when other than, 2022, which again, he didn't start the year in the first 2 months, but he hasn't done that in the first half of pretty much any season. So I'm still a bit skeptical because the swing decisions haven't really gotten all that better. And that's really been the biggest thing for Michael Harris. I don't think the Braves are going to trade him this offseason. To answer your question, Zach, I think Michael Harris will at least be the center fielder for next year. Now, as I said on the podcast, I think there's a little bit more hope that the changes from the second half this year can stick because there were some clear mechanical adjustments made in his swing. And you can certainly pinpoint that as the reason why maybe he has turned things around. So I do think Michael Harris will be the center fielder next year, unless just some crazy trade comes up. And look, a lot of you are going to ask me what I think AA does. I think everything is on the table for AA this offseason. If he sees a good deal to, make this, to swap things up and make this team better, I think he's going to do it. I don't know that anybody is completely untouchable this offseason outside of Acuna, Baldwin, Olsen, that group. I don't know that anybody is untouchable this offseason. But I do think with what Michael Harris has done in the second half, I do think it's less likely now that they look to trade him in the offseason, even if that was on the table. And I don't know that necessarily was going to happen anyway. Like I said, I think pretty much anybody in any type of discussion, if it can make the team better, Alex is going to look at it and think about it. But I do think Michael Harris will, if I had to predict now, I think Michael Harris will be the center fielder for next year. And we'll just have to see if these swing adjustments carry over to the beginning of next season, or if it's the same thing we've seen for the past 3 years now, where it's a slow first half and then he heats up in the second half. Truist Park says, if the Braves get picked 2 or 3 in the 2026 draft, who would you pick? I'm taking either Rock Chalowski from UCLA or I'm taking Justin LeBron from Alabama. I'm taking a bona fide shortstop that can handle it defensively, and they have obviously the bat to go along with it. Shortstops are generally the best players that you're going to draft anyway, so I'm taking one of those two guys. If I get 2 or 3 pick, one of them is going to be available right now. As the things stand, I'm taking one of them. All right, we got a lot more questions to get to on today's episode, including the question about Marcell and Iggy coming back. We'll get into those here next. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I currently got sick family members at home right now. I'm barely getting any sleep as it is. I could use a little bit of a boost. And in golf, it's all about good good times with good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-hour energy shots today. Thank you, as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Lindsay and the guys over at MLB Game Night breaking down the biggest highlights from each and every day that's left in the Major League Baseball season. I know it's been a rough year, but it is kind of sad. We're getting to the close of another Major League Baseball season. So a lot of exciting stuff happening down the stretch for other teams in Major League Baseball fighting for a postseason spot. They'll keep you up to date there at Locked On MLB. Papachi says, with Grant Holmes electing not to have Tommy John, are we going to run into this same situation next season, or is this because they've had to have him go deep in games and him being a former bullpen guy, he's really not built that way? I don't know if I necessarily understand the second half of the question. I guess what you're asking there is it the transition from reliever to starter? I mean, definitely so. When you're going from throwing 70 innings a year to throwing 100 plus, you're putting more wear and tear on that arm. And as I've said so many times, arms aren't meant to do that over and over again. And eventually it's usually just a matter of if not when for pitchers that they're going to need Tommy John or they're going to need some type of shoulder surgery. And yeah, when you're doing it more, it's going to lead to more injuries. So I think, to answer the second half of your question, yeah, if you're throwing more innings, it's more likely that you're going to have surgery. Now, to answer the first part of it and him not electing to have Tommy John surgery, that's just because whether he has it now or when the decision was made a couple of weeks ago, or whether he has it this offseason, he's still out for all of next year. So timing wise, it just made sense to say, I'm not going to have it right now. And he's going to test it out, as he said, at the end of the season. If it's still bothering him, I would not be surprised if Grant Holmes still ends up having Tommy John surgery. It's just the timing of it. You might as well just, rest it, try to rehab it and see if it, gets better and you can avoid Tommy John. And if not, then go ahead and have it. But either way, he was going to be out for 2026. So it didn't really matter at that point. Jamin Legger says, with Cookie getting DFA'd, is there a chance we see Richie in his spot? So J.R. Richie, fantastic outing for Gwinnett on Thursday night. He's been fantastic for Gwinnett since getting called up there. I've been wanting to see him this year. Here's the problem now with J.R. Richie getting a debut in Atlanta. We talked about Waldrop earlier, but J.R. Richie, even more so than Hurston Waldrop, is coming up on his innings limit. And I just don't know how many more innings the Braves are going to let him throw this year. So that could be holding him back from getting a chance. Maybe we see him get a start or two just to get his feet wet, but it's starting to feel more and more like at this point that J.R. Richie's not going to make his debut this year, and they'll come into spring training and fight for a spot. I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to just at least get a look of him at the big league level this year, but they definitely want to monitor his innings, being a younger guy, still being not too far removed from Tommy John surgery. I would imagine they're probably going to hold him back here pretty soon, if not just shut him down altogether. Mike says, does Chris Sale finish his career in Atlanta? I think the Braves could do a similar thing with Chris Sale as they did with Charlie Morton and just continue to give him. I think Chris Sale likes it here. I think the Braves love having him here. He's a great, clubhouse presence, leader, and just like, Charlie Morton was for years. He's just better than Charlie Morton right now. So I think even more so, if the Braves wanted to give him $20 million on 1-year deals with a $20 million team option, I think that would be a fine thing to do for Chris Sale, for the remainder of his career. I don't know how much longer Chris Sale wants to go. Obviously, he's pitching well. He's also got some major milestones that he's approaching, 3,000 strikeouts, all of that. So it'll be fun to see him do all of that in Atlanta. As long as he's pitching well, I hope he stays in Atlanta for the rest of his career. And I think there's an opportunity for the Braves to do that, similar to what they did with Charlie Morton. John Hayden says, I would like to see Nacho at second next season. I'll ask you why. Also, wouldn't be opposed to adding a second baseman via trade or free agency this offseason. What are your thoughts on the situation heading into the offseason? So kind of similar to Michael Harris and Ozzy coming off a big game Thursday against the Mets. If Ozzy has a strong finish to the season, I think they got to pick up the option. There's just not much to gain by declining his option. And you can pick up the option and then still decide to trade him if another opportunity comes up. And when I was talking about with AA earlier, where I think pretty much anything is on the table, if something comes up and there's the ability to upgrade it at second base, something that makes a lot of sense, and it's got to be a pretty big upgrade to move on from Ozzy, I think he'll do it. I also just wouldn't be surprised if Ozzy is a second baseman going in to next year. It's $7 million, but I do think the leash has to be a lot tighter. Now, I don't necessarily believe Nacho is that answer. I've not seen enough from him at the big league level yet to say he's just can step in and be better than give you more than what Ozzy is giving you. And even the defense from Nacho, while it looks great at third, at second base, at least last year, not great there. So I'm not convinced that it's Nacho. Again, I think it might just depend on what materializes in the offseason. And if there does become a great opportunity to make a significant upgrade at second base, I think Alex will do it. If not, I think he's fine rolling with Ozzy again at second base at that price, knowing that, okay, we get into the season, it's the same Ozzy that we've seen for, 2 years now, that you gotta move on. And that's obviously harder to do at the beginning of a season and during a season. But I think that's most likely the direction that they're going to go, which I know gives a lot of people a lot of vibes that they're just going to run things back. But we'll have to see. We'll get more questions on that, so I'll wait till we get to those. The chosen one. Do you think Ozzy Albies doesn't reach his full potential because baseball isn't his only passion? I think it's just a job to him. He seems more passionate about his fish and dogs, but the way he played recently puzzles on why he's not more consistent at the plate. So I don't think that has anything to do with Ozzy's struggles at the plate. I think you look at Ozzy's profile as a hitter, and this has always been a possible outcome because he's always somebody that is very aggressive, chases a lot, but he's always gotten to the power. And the power has kind of overcome all of that. And now the power is kind of zapped, and you're still seeing the bad swing decisions and the bad chases. So this has always been in Ozzy's game, or at least the potential of this has always been in Ozzy's game if the power was zapped away, and the power has been. So I don't think it has anything to do with Ozzy's hobbies and any of that. He does great work for the dogs, I know, and all of that. And I know that he is very passionate about that, but I'm not going to – guys just can't sit there and focus on baseball 24/7. They got lives too. They have hobbies outside of baseball. They are certainly free to do some of those things in their free time. Ozzy wants to be great. Ozzy works hard to be great. I don't think that has anything to do with it. Justin Shoemake, do you really think Atlanta will be big spenders in the offseason in the free agent market? It's usually not their MO, but they have obvious holes to fill in the rotation and bullpen and maybe upgrade at shortstop. Also, will this offense define AA as a GM if he doesn't make upgrades? To answer the last question, yes, I think this is a pivotal offseason for Alex Anthopoulos coming off a bad year. However this finishes up, it's going to be considered a bad year for the Braves. You can blame injuries if you want, but we all know that wasn't the biggest factor. So this is going to be a big offseason for AA. You can make the excuse for him last offseason that there was a money crunch, that they wanted to stay under the tax. So he's got that excuse built in. That should not be the excuse this offseason. Now, do I think they're going to go wild in free agency? No, because as you said, Justin, that's not their MO. But I do think they are going to spend. I don't think they're going to go into a season with obvious holes in the bullpen and with some depth concerns in the rotation and not address them in the offseason like they did this past offseason going into this year. So I don't think that's going to happen. I do think they're going to spend money, but I'm not expecting them to spend top money. I still don't think they're going to see them sign any of the top free agents, but I do think they're going to be more aggressive in spending money this year than they were last year. How could they not be? Rob P., do you think Murphy batting .212 and being in the lineup less in recent weeks will hurt his trade value this winter? I'm under the idea that we have to trade him. He gives us next to nothing at the plate, and good catching is hard to come by. So we should get a good shortstop, second base for him. So I am not in agreement with that. If a good deal comes up for Sean Murphy, I still like Sean Murphy a lot. I think he's a good player and a good value. But if a trade comes up, I'm not completely against trading him. He has a 110 WRC plus this year. So that's 10 points above average. So to say he gives you next to nothing offensively just isn't true. So I'm not I'm not opposed to trading Sean Murphy in the right deal, but I'm also certainly okay with keeping both he and Baldwin, especially if that DH spot's going to be open where you can use both guys. I do think it does certainly seem like Murphy has become the backup catcher to Drake Baldwin, and that's a lot to pay for a backup catcher. So again, it wouldn't surprise me if they trade him, but I'm not with you where I think the Braves have to trade Sean Murphy. I'm perfectly fine having him and Drake Baldwin the rest, or next season at least, and especially if the DH is opened up. All right, we got a lot more questions left to get to on today's episode. We'll get back into those here next. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Do you have subscriptions that you forget you're paying for? I linked my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions that I wasn't even using. Canceling those alone saved me money every month. And does this help with the budgeting for a couple, for independent goals, etc.? Monarch Money makes it simple to review my finances with my partner. We can both see budgets, goals, and spending activity in one place. Today's our 10-year anniversary. Happy anniversary, honey. I love you. Thank you so much. And you can help take the stress out of your marriage so you can make it 10 years with Monarch Money. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. All right, we got a couple more questions to get into on today's episode. Next one from Dustin Mounts. Do you see any prospects being almost untouchable in the offseason, kind of like Baldwin was last offseason? There always seem to be one or two, which is the reason I asked. J.R. Ritchie pitched another great game last night, maybe him and Waldrop. So looking at the Braves prospects, for me, I don't know that there's anybody I wouldn't move in the right deal. Kind of like I said last year. And look, last year I was all for trading Drake Baldwin for Garrett Crochet because I thought that highly of Garrett Crochet. And look, Crochet's having a great season. I would love to have him right now. But obviously keeping Drake Baldwin has been a very good decision too. I doubt they're going to trade. If I had to pick some untouchables right now, I'd probably say Cam Caminiti, obviously Tate Southenstein, who they just drafted, and I'd probably say Diego Torrens. I think those are maybe some of their highest upside players that they have. I doubt Briggs McKenzie, who they just gave a big overslot to, that they just drafted. Obviously guys they just drafted, I don't think are going to be in conversations. I think Cam Caminiti, obviously a first-round pick they just drafted, has some big upside. I love J.R. Ritchie. You've been listening to the podcast for a while, as I know you have, Dustin. You know how much I love J.R. Ritchie, and I think he's pretty much proven that he's ready for a shot at the big league level. I don't think he's somebody that I wouldn't move in the right deal. Now, it'd have to be somebody that's almost all-star level that you got control over, but I don't see anybody else in this system that I just would not trade. Certainly there are guys that I love. I mean, I love Caminiti. I love Ritchie. I love Didier Fuentes. There's a lot of guys in here that I really love and I want the Braves to keep, but there's not really anybody that I just completely would say no to in the right deal. I don't see any Cy Young winners in this prospect. I don't see any MVP players in this prospect group right now. I don't see any Ronald Acuna Juniors. I don't see any Austin Rileys in this system right now that I just would not trade in any type of circumstance. And again, some of them, it would take a haul for me to move them, but there's just nobody for me that I think is completely untouchable. But I did mention some guys I think they obviously would like to avoid moving. Jackson Stevens, enjoyer. Sorry about Jackson Stevens, by the way. I can't believe the Braves did him dirty like that. Jackson Stevens, enjoyer, says, you're the GM of the Braves. This team is going for a championship in 26. Give us your offseason. So I'm not going to do that now. It's almost always one of the first podcasts I do of the offseason. So I'm going to save it for that. But that is always a fun discussion, but I'm going to save that one for the offseason. PJ's Braves, what are your thoughts on the idea of Baldwin Murphy being the catching DH combo next season? And do you think Murphy gets traded if AA signs a DH only like Ozuna? If the Braves, and this is one of the first questions I'm bringing back, Ozuna, Jason Watson also says, with the resurgence of both Ozuna and Iglesias, is there a chance that both can be re-signed to one-year deals with less value, like 10 to 12 million? So kind of coupling those questions together here and focusing on Ozuna for PJ's question. If they were to re-sign Ozuna, I think it does increase the likelihood that you trade Sean Murphy. Not saying I necessarily agree with that, but I think it does increase the chances. And not saying that it has to happen. But obviously, you get a DH only like Ozuna, it's taking away at bats from one of the catchers. And I think it would make sense in that case to move Sean Murphy. Now, as far as Iglesias, or as far as Ozuna and Iglesias, and my thoughts on whether the Braves should bring either of them back if they have, good finishes to the season, which it looks like, at least for now, both of them are. Like Jason said, if you could get them on one-year deals for 10 to 12 million, I don't hate it, but I also don't love it at this point. I've said numerous times on here, I'm ready to just move on in the DH spot and keep it more fluid so that you can put Acuna in there at times. You can put, if Sean Murphy's on a heater or Baldwin or whoever, you keep them hot in that DH spot. You put Profar in there every now and then to hide some of his defensive issues. So I'm more on board with making the DH spot more fluid and not bringing back a DH only type. But if Ozuna has, the second half finish and the power is there, along with the plate discipline that we've seen all year long, and he, nobody else is really buying into it, wants to give him a contract, and the Braves can get him for 10 or 12 million, it seems like a pretty good deal that you can't pass up. So I wouldn't hate it. Same for Iglesias. If teams aren't, wanting to invest too much in a, mid-30s guy that's coming off one of his worst seasons, and you can get him for, maybe even less than that, 8 or 10 million. I think I'd feel more comfortable giving him something like that, where if you need to put him in the 7th, 8th inning role as a setup guy, I think he could do it, which he did at times this year very well. I don't hate that idea either. So yeah, I think there is a world which the Braves could bring both of those guys back next year. AAWX says, with how good the Braves offense has been lately, do you think this is just another second half resurgence by the Braves, or is it the Tim Hires effect finally kicking in? And if we continue what we have been doing, has Hires earned himself at least one more year? Again, a lot of that, I think there's some other questions on this too, depends on coaching situation for next year. You bring in a new coach, they may want to hire an entirely new staff. Look, I always thought that the Tim Hires addition made sense for where this offense needed to go and how the game was changing. I just didn't know if this group of players that they've assembled were capable of making those changes and those adjustments. And maybe they finally are, and it's just taking a lot longer. Maybe it's just a hot second half. Maybe it's just a course correction from how unlucky they were in the first half, and we're just seeing things course correct in the second half. I do think the one thing we've seen from Tim Hires' effect has been the plate discipline, getting the walks, drawing the walks, something they've done all year long. If you can do that and then add in the little things with runners in scoring position, being able to just take your hits and, get some of the power back. So there's still a lot that I think has to happen that we haven't seen in the Tim Hires regime so far, to make me just feel completely confident in giving him another year. Smoke says, when does the luxury tax season officially end for 2025? Since the Braves are resetting their CBT, when can they officially make moves for 2026 without impacting the reset? So remember, when you're making signings, so you're signing a free agent this offseason, you're signing them for the 2026 season. So that money is for 2026. You're not affecting the 2025 luxury tax threshold at that point. I believe the luxury tax threshold officially resets at the beginning of December. When I looked it up, it said December 2nd is when that official cutoff time is for what your final luxury tax number is. But you can still sign players before that, but you're signing them for 2026 and beyond. So that money's going to go towards the 2026 luxury tax threshold. Eddie says, since the All-Star break, the offense has been top 5 in baseball. Do you believe in this turnaround enough to keep Hires next year? Might all be moot if the new manager wants his own guys. I'm at least not totally against it right now. And I'm kind of right there with you, Eddie. I'm not totally against it at the moment. I don't know that I'm completely buying into it either. We're going to have to see how the last month and a half goes to really, I think, dive into the mechanical changes and everything, the approach changes that we're seeing. I can't wait to go to the end of the season and do a first and second half plate discipline change from the team perspective and what we've seen. And if it just was taking guys a while to get on board, or that this was just, like I said earlier, a course correction from the first half. So I think the jury is still out there on Tim Hires, if he deserves another year, if he's going to get another year. Ransom says, with Schwellenbach fracturing his elbow, how concerned are you about his return next year? I'm very concerned. I mean, a fracture in your elbow, I know they said the ligament in there was fine, and that's certainly good news, but again, pitchers are just ticking time bombs, and it's just a matter of when, not if. Now, Schwellenbach's had Tommy John surgery, doesn't, prevent him from having another one. And it was just a fracture in the elbow. Like I said, the ligament was fine when they went in there, but I'm concerned about all pitchers, to be quite honest with you. All right, we are definitely going over time today. I apologize for that, but I want to try to get to the rest of these questions really quickly here. J-Baz says, do you think the Braves should move Strider back to the bullpen? No, absolutely not. I don't think they should at all. Calvin Finner, the offense playing better makes me more concerned. They will run it back, but I don't trust it. Do you? I don't completely trust it. I do think, and I've said this already, I think they will make one significant change. I don't know that it'll be a complete blow up now at this point with the resurgence of Michael Harris. And if Ozzy has a better second half, I don't think it'll be a complete blow up in the offseason, but I do think there will be at least one big position player change or addition rather this offseason. So I don't think they'll completely run it back. Calvin also asked about acquiring Donovan from the Cardinals for second base to move on from Ozzy. I mean, he is more of that type of hitter that I think would play better in Tim Hires type of offense. So if you're sticking with that style and approach of, patient at bats, putting the ball in play, I think Brendan Donovan certainly would fit that if he were available. And also, do you think we can shed Profar's deal? I'm not all for just shedding Profar. And again, Profar he's been that guy. He's been with this offense, what you want it to be when you hired Tim Hires. So I'm not all for shedding Profar's contract. And it feels like it would essentially be a money dump. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Unless you're going to open up that money to go sign Kyle Tucker or somebody, you're going to do something big with that money. Dubs, could Ozuna or Iglesias play the way into rejecting a qualifying offer? Both of them have already received a qualifying offer in the past, and they can't have more than one. And I don't think they're going to play their way into a point where they get, $20+ million, get offered $20+ million through a qualifying offer. Randy, tell me your picks, one each for 2026, not who you think, but who you want. Any free agent starter. I want Framber Valdez. I have been saying Michael King, but his injuries this year are kind of worrying me. Any free agent bat. I want Kyle Tucker. Head coach. I'm leaning towards David Ross. Lindsey did a good write-up on this in his newsletter about the next coach for the Braves. I've really been leaning toward David Ross for a while now. I like Skip Shoemaker too, to the most prominent options out there. And I've also always mentioned Torey Lovello of the Diamondbacks if they were able to steal him away. Eric 8504 says, who would you want to see get called up and see what we have for next season? J.R. Ritchie, we talked about him a lot. Even Lara, if they were to bring him back, I know they're stretching him back out for a starter, but if they were to bring him back up in a bullpen role, I wouldn't mind seeing that either. And final question here from Jordan Griffey, who says, what do you attribute Harris and Albies turnaround to? Does it save Hires' job? Do you believe in this offense? So we talked about Hires a lot already. Had a podcast earlier this week on Harris, and really nothing to point to other than just the same thing he's always done in the second half, would just hit the ball harder. Swing decisions aren't really that much better. And Albies, I don't know that we've seen a turnaround all that much from Ozzy. I know he's coming off a really good game, but I certainly don't believe it for Ozzy. I'm skeptical for Harris, and I'm skeptical that this is all a factor of Tim Hires' offense so far. So that's kind of where I leave those questions right there. All right, thanks very much for joining me here today. PH Wiz, Neil White, Misty, Mass, Pepe in the conversations here. Scott Bingham, appreciate you all joining me here live on this Friday afternoon mailbag edition. Me and Lindsay back on the postcast tonight. Braves going up against the Guardians, Hurst and Waldrop on the mound. So that should be a fun one. Make sure you subscribe here to Locked On Braves, wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.